All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Once again, my name is Jerry Bartels. I'm a Civil Technical Specialist here at Autodesk. I'd like to welcome you to our presentation today, the 30-minute workout. Today we're going to be focusing on some odds, ends, and important things. Joining me on the call is Jeff Bartels and Dana Judge. They'll be handling questions and that in the background. So if during the presentation, if anything comes up that you have a question about, please put it in the Q&A pane, and they'll be happy to take care of that as we go. If you have any questions and we don't have time to reach that or get through it at the end of today's session, we'll be happy to reach back out to you afterwards and make sure you get the information that you need. So let's go ahead and get started. We started doing these presentations probably a couple months ago now. The concept was that all of us in some form or fashion have had some training, whether we've learned on our own or through a book or through a class or attended a training session. However, when we're talking about things like Civil 3D or even MAP or even just plain AutoCAD, the focus is generally on the things that we need to know to perform our immediate job. And the program is available, its abilities are pretty extensive as far as what's possible. So instead of focusing on the need-to-know features, what we wanted to do with these sessions is focus on those things that maybe are acquired over time or things that aren't normally dedicated to a individual or a specific training session. So as we go through and I demonstrate some of the tools within the package, we'll be doing it through a kind of like an abstract fashion, so that we want you to focus on more on the functionality of the tool and not necessarily solving a specific problem. And it's always important to us that we start and end on time. So with our session today, the things I'm going to be focusing on, we're going to hopefully end any debate that may be out there between what freeze is versus off. We'll also delve into a couple other variations on freeze with VP freeze and new VP freeze, all of which are helpful tools. I want to focus a little bit on the layer dialog box, some things that we can do to enhance our experience with that. I'm going to touch on drawing logs, what we can do with those, a little bit about the status bar. We'll go into some geolocation and show how we can locate some areas, take advantage of some of the free Bing imagery that's available to us within the system. And then if I have any time left, we'll get into some bonus content. So with that, one of the things we pride ourselves on is it's a PowerPoint free zone. So we like to go directly into the application and show as much of what we can live. So I'm going to come down here. We'll hop over into Civil 3D. I'm currently using Civil 3D 2021. That being said, most of what I'm going to show, with the exception of maybe when I get into the bonus area at the end, will not be 2021 specific. Most of what I'm going to show today will be applicable 2016 up through today. So first thing, I'm looking at a surface here that was created in Civil 3D. That surface obviously has several layers represented in it that contain the contours, the boundary, the points, some of the objects that were created as a result of the description keys. First thing I want to do is let's take a look at the layer dialog box here for a minute. I can type in LA for layer, or I can select the layer dialog from the ribbon. And when I go in, I'm sure everybody here is in and out of the layer dialog quite a bit. Before I do too much with it, a couple things I want to make sure folks are aware of. As I look at the list here, there are some things that we can do to facilitate how that's displayed, maybe make it a little bit easier to work with. First of which, we've got some options. If I right-click on the headers, I can come down and I can maximize all columns, for example. If I maximize that, it will automatically expand each column to the maximum width of the information that is either in the column or in the header. So for those folks that maybe have longer layers, layer names and information as part of what's in their dialog, that'll help make that a little bit easier to see. If you're a little tighter on space and the information that you want to show in the resolution that you have available, we also have an option for optimize all columns. If we optimize it, it shows it in the minimum space required, and that it will show my longest layer name, but other areas it won't necessarily take into consideration the column name, so it applies some brevity into what's available there. So first thing, we can control some of that. Next thing, there are a plethora of layers that are typically available when we're working on a project. One of the ways that I like to address that is through a filter. So I can isolate or select just the layers that I'm interested in. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to make a new property filter here, and I'm just going to call this V-stuff for right now. And setting the parameters to control what's displayed, I'm going to say V dash and then asterisk will show me all the layers that begin with V dash. Going back to some of the conversations we've had in the past about wildcards, I could also do like maybe 4 question marks that would show me those things that are broken out with 4 characters as opposed to everything with an asterisk. We'll just do asterisk for right now to keep it simple. I'll say OK. That filter is now available for me on the side, and you see that my display now represents what is controlled by that filter. Great part about that is I can use that as an either or by using the invert filter on the bottom. So that's showing me everything but the V layers, or in this case we'll show just what's important to us with V. One other thing that I'd like you to be aware of is if I set a filter here and we close out of the dialog box, I'm going to move this just down and out of the way here for a moment. What I can do is if I click on the drop down now for my layers, you see that it's automatically isolated my layers or limited those to those that are included in the filter. Now that may be exactly what you're looking for. It may also be that, you know what, in the filter I want that to apply to the dialog box, but I don't necessarily want it to apply to my drop down. In the drop down I always want to have access to all of my layers. The great part is we've got a choice in that, how that works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type in LA to go back into layer. And if I come over into the settings, clicking on the gear, there is an option right down here at the bottom that says, right here, that says apply layer filter to layer toolbar. So if I uncheck that, then the toolbar will always show all the layers. If I leave it checked, it will show me only those layers that are part of my, my filter. So you can adjust that as what makes sense for your specific needs. I'm going to leave that set for right now because I'm going to be focusing on the layers that begin with V. And I want to talk a little bit about the difference between what off and what freeze means. There's a lot of folks out there that I've seen on websites and otherwise that talk about freeze as being another layer of off. It is in the sense that if it's frozen, we can't see it, but it does some other important things as well. So for example, I've got a circle here that's on a layer that's called V-digitize. And if I, well, let's start by doing this. I'm going to say zoom extents. You can see that when I say zoom extents, I get the extents of all that is in my project right now. What I'm going to do is we'll say turn the V-digitize. I'm going to turn that off. So that disappears. We'll adjust my display, but if I say zoom extents again, you notice that it's still respecting the location of the geometry that's on off, or that's on the a layer that's been turned off. So it's still there. We can actually still select things or deal with objects that are on a layer that's off. Instead, if we freeze that layer, what I can do is come down, we'll turn it back on, and instead we'll freeze that. If that layer is frozen, now if we do a zoom extents, it's as if that geometry was never there. All right, so from a freeze perspective, it makes it not only disappear from the screen, but it also helps from performance. So from a frozen perspective, your drawing will perform as if that geometry isn't even in the file. All right, so like the first question, I start thinking, ooh, we've got objects that have dynamic relationships between things in Civil 3D. What does that do if I start freezing objects or freezing layers that control some of those objects? I've run a couple of examples, tests where if I froze points, did my surface want to update if the surface was built from those points, and it didn't impact it at all. That's not to say that it wouldn't impact any other variation between objects. I've not gone through an exhaustive test of that. So something to keep in the back of your mind that while freezing things is great for performance, if you have some behavior that's unexpected, thaw the layers and see if that goes away, that maybe you've frozen something that's really needs to remain, available as far as the drawing is concerned. Okay? So, a couple other things. There were some other options in that dialog box. I'm going to come out here into my layout, and if I look at a viewport here, I'm going to double click in the viewport, and I'll say LA to go into my layers. You'll see there's a couple of columns here. We see one is VP freeze, we see the other column is new VP freeze. All right, what exactly does those do? Well, that is going to freeze the contents of the layer within that particular viewport. Notice we've got options to control things like color and line type and line weight and transparency on as a whole or by the viewport. In this particular case, we have a VP freeze, which is similar to off, and it's also similar to freeze. What I'm going to do is we'll come down to the digitize. Well, actually, we'll come down, let's say V-node. That's where my points are. I'm going to take and freeze that in this layer. Or in this viewport. I'll go ahead and close out of that. You see that that goes away. In addition to, so it's like off in that those things are not displayed, but it's also like freeze in that if I had a block or something that had multiple layers, everything that was associated with that would also be frozen. All right, so we can control visibility on a layer by layer basis. The other thing that we can do from within this box is if I was come down to, let's say V-node and say new VP, new viewport freeze, we'll freeze it there. What that will do for us is I will drop out of that command. We'll come back into my layout. I'm going to say MView, and I'll create a new viewport. And when I create that viewport, we can see that the information for that, or those points or that V-node layer is frozen in any new ones. So as a mechanism, by creating additional geometry, creating additional viewports, you know what, I built this, but I never want this to show up in any additional viewports that I have. I can use the new VP freeze to be able to control that. Okay, let's roll back. Come back to my model here. One more thing that I want to show with respect to layers that can be helpful. Like I mentioned before, we've got a lot of layers here that we deal with. We touched on filters for a moment. One thing that we can do with filters is if I right-click, I can actually add the filters to my layer list. So let's take and turn on all layers. And we come up to the top, we can see now that the filters are part of our layer list. So the cool thing about that is if we're filtering things, basically we want to isolate it to do something with that as a group. By having the filters themselves displayed in the list, you know, we get like half a snowflake and half a star because things are either frozen or thawed. But now we can work with the entire group at once. So if for some reason I didn't want to see any of the things that were on the filter for those V layers, I could turn those off or turn all of them back on. All right, gives us one other layer of flexibility. Last thing I'd like to do, sometimes it is helpful to get a list of layers, what exists in your file. So what I'm going to do is to get a list like that, I'm going to hit Control-A to grab all of the layers that are there. We'll hit Control-C to copy that to my clipboard. And then I'm going to use my tab here to work my way around to Excel. And by clicking in a blank Excel file, I can go ahead and say paste, and I've automatically created a document within Excel that automatically breaks all the individual values out into their own cells. So it lists not only the status, but the layer name, whether it's on, frozen, color, line type. So if I'm creating an example of maybe CAD standards or something like that, it's a quick way to harvest from a drawing file what the layer states are and what they should be, and then have a mechanism to record that. Okay, let's do this, shifting gears. I'd like to come down a little bit and talk a little bit about the command line. We've done a number of things since I started working in this file, since the file opened. What I could do is maybe I was adding coordinates and things like that. Getting data out of this command line may be helpful for us at some point, whether it was entering coordinates, determining what commands have been launched, things like that. From within the command line area, we can run a command that's called copy hist for copy history. If we do copy history, it automatically grabs all of the information that's available in the command line, and I'm going to walk that down to a text file here, and I can go ahead and paste that. So if we scroll up to the top, we see the last entry was copy history. We come up to the top, we can see everything that's been done since the minute that this file opened. All right, so it can be helpful if we'd like to capture some of the information that's gone on as we've been working on a file. But another thing, in the instance that we've got a problem, You know, if we have a drawing, something fails, or you know, we have a crash or something like that. If we're trying to beta test that or work with support to get something resolved, it's like, well, what were the last 5 things that I was doing that might have facilitated or led up to having that problem? Well, if I'm out of the system, I can't do copy history, but there is something that I can do to help facilitate that. There's a command that's called, we'll say, log file on. And if I turn that on, it automatically starts building a log file for this drawing starting immediately. All right, and that's system specific, so all drawings that I work on my machine right now, it will generate a log. So it will have from the beginning of the time I'm in the file to the end of the time that I'm in that file for every time I'm in. So those logs will accumulate, and then if for some reason that log provides value that I would want to go back and look at it, I could find it. To take a quick look at that, where that's stored, would be helpful to know. If I right-click and go to Options, I will come to Files here, and then we'll scroll down, and we see that there's an option here for Log File Location, and we can see where that's placed. Right now that's placed under my users folder, so it's kind of buried on my C drive. We have the option that we could select and browse to a different folder. Maybe I'd want to put it on a network drive or another location to where I could access ones from other machines if I'm in some form of a CAD manager or administrative state to be able to access the logs. I could do that. Let's go out to that folder and take a quick look at that. So we'll open up the dialog box here. I'm going to come down to C. It is under users. It is under my name. It is under app data, local. It is under Autodesk. It is under Civil 3D 2021 ENU. And then here are my logs. So this is the log that I'm in right now from when I was in this file just most recently. I've really not done anything, but if I were to open that log, basically that's all that's happened from the time that it's been opened. What I can do is if I open this one, this is one that I was working on earlier. If I were to open that from the time that I was in all the way till the time that I completed, it would have all of that information. Now, once again, if I had a catastrophic failure, I could come back and see what the last values of those commands or last things I ran to help troubleshoot what might have caused the problem. The other thing that I can do with this is just to get an idea, even from an administrative standpoint, who's doing what with the system, what type of commands are they running, why does it seem like every time, you know, Bob's working on this, we're having issues that we're not having otherwise. If I want to have some idea what exactly is Bob doing, I could hit Control-A to copy all of this to the clipboard, or I'm sorry, to select it all, Control-C to copy it to the clipboard. We'll come back to our Excel spreadsheet. We'll build a new tab here. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that, and that throws all the commands in. I'm then going to hit Control-A to grab everything that's in here, and I'm going to go ahead and we'll say filter, so I can filter by everything that's on that that we've posted. Now basically it's one-line strings of text. All of the commands begin with the word command, so I can click on the down arrow and I can sort those. So once I have that, these are all the things that begin with command. So if I was running this all day, I would have access to all the different things that were done. You can see I hit escape or cancel quite a bit. We'll come down to the end of where command is. Because I don't want to sort through a million of these things, I'm going to copy those to my clipboard here. I'm going to create one more tab and then paste all those so that they're in the system. And then what I'm going to do is, once again, I'm going to hit Control-A, and then I'm going to come up to Data, and I'm going to say I would like to remove duplicates. So it's going to search column A. We'll say OK. Basically, there was 52 unique values. These are the 52 commands that were used during the time of me working on that file. So from here, I can start to look down. Okay, I understand what all these things are. Maybe I hit a command in here like DB list. You know, maybe I don't know what that is, what was going on with that. In any event, it provides a mechanism that I can go back and research and use that as part of my administrative process, or just visibility as far as what's going on. Okay, let's do this. Working my way a little bit further down. I've got the system tray down here at the bottom with a number of things that are displayed. Lots of tools can be displayed down here at the bottom of the screen. One thing would certainly be helpful for me, especially as if I'm moving around on the screen, is maybe to have some running coordinates to get an idea of where exactly I am in the larger scheme of things. I'm going to go to customization here at the corner. I'm going to select coordinates or any of the other things that may help me. So we'll go ahead and select coordinates. That helps, gives me a better idea of where I'm at. But what would help me even more is to give me some understanding of, is a projection been applied to this file? You know, am I in a coordinate system currently? All right, unfortunately, there's not a box that I can select for the system tray to be able to do that. I could always come in and look at settings, select here, edit drawing settings, and then come back to units and zone and then verify that. I could do that, but it would be faster if it were to display it in the bottom. Fortunately, I can display it in the bottom using a tool that's called Map Status Bar. If we turn on the Map Status Bar and we chose to show that, within the status bar down here at the bottom, it will now show me what the projection is that's been applied to this particular file, and also give me the option through Map that I could select a different projection if need be. Whether I'm dealing in Map or the Civil 3D side, there are two tools that we can associate projections. Either one would work in this case, because if you set it in one place, it will also set it in the other. Okay? Because I've got a projection associated with this file, the other thing that I can do is I can start to take advantage of some of the aerial imagery that's available to us automatically through the application. So let's say, for example, I'm going to be working in a project on a bridge that is the intersection of, in Illinois here, routes State Route 90 and State Route, or Interstate 90 and State Route 25. I want to be able to, you know, I'm in that projection, but if I want to actually go to that location, is there a way that I can do that quickly and within the system? And the answer to that is yes, I can. I'm going to check one other thing, because there's one process that we're going to use to enter a value, which is lat and long. So I'm going to check that before I get there. So Ambient Settings, I'm going to come down, we will take a look at lats and longs, and I want to make sure that my lat and long format by default, I'm going to set that to decimal as opposed to degrees, minutes, seconds. All right, I'll show you why that's important in a minute. But let's take a look at that location. Well, I want to find that bridge. I'll say Geo to access the geographic location. I want to select my location from a map. Do I want to use online map data? Absolutely I do. And the cool part about this is with my projection set, I could type in an address. You know, any address, if I happen to know the address of where I'm going to be going. If I'm working on a transportation or a highway or a bridge job, I'm not going to have an address, but I'm still going to have a rough idea where it is. So in our case, the area that I'm looking for is Elgin, Illinois. So I can see that on the map here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to back up the interstate that I'm looking for. This is 90, and then where it intersects Route 25 is the bridge location. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a marker. That marker is now in Elgin here. We'll back up a touch. I'm going to drag that marker over here, and we'll drop that on the location of the bridge. We'll zoom up on that a little bit. So there is State Route 90 and State Route 25. With that marker placed, it's updated my latitude and longitude for me in the dialog here. So I'm going to capture the latitude, and I'm going to put that in my text file here. Let's go ahead and paste that. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to grab my longitude, making sure that I have the negative sign so I don't wind up in South America here. We'll go ahead and paste that as well. So that's good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel out of this. And the reason I'm going to cancel out of it is the tool was kind of set up for AutoCAD. For folks that aren't on a, we're already on a projection, I'm using this tool to determine my location where I'd like to be in the projection, not set a new one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel out of this, and then I'm going to use a command zoom. So I'll hit Z for zoom. I'm going to hit C for center. And then for my center point, what do I want to be looking at? I'm going to say apostrophe LL, which means lat long. It's one of the hotkey commands, if you will, for Civil 3D. And then my latitude that we'll be putting in, we'll come back over to here. It's going to be this guy. And I will paste it in there and hit enter. We'll do the same thing for the longitude. We'll grab that guy, paste it in here. I'll hit enter. I don't have any other values I'm going to put in, so I'm going to hit escape. After I hit escape, my magnification height that I'm going to put in is just the distance I'm going to be above it. Let's just say 500, and when I hit enter, it takes me to that point in the projection. So I don't see it right now because I don't have the aerial imagery turned on, so I'm going to go to Geolocation. I'm going to click on the down arrow here for Map Off, and we'll set it to Map Hybrid. And when it comes up, I should be looking at that bridge that is the intersection of routes 25 and State Route 90. Okay, so very quickly I can use that tool to locate exactly what I'm looking for. All right, last thing I want to do, something that is different with 2021. I know there are some folks out there that are experimenting with more recent versions of Civil 3D, perhaps because be able to take advantage of some of the things that are available with BIM 360 Design. But with the release of 2021, and it might have also been in 2020, although I don't remember it, it's definitely in 2021, there were some changes to the trim and the extend commands. And it's important for us to understand that, especially if we're working on projects that are civil in nature or have a lot of entities. So I've got some geometry here. What I want to do is I want to take this line here, make it a little bit easier to see. I'm going to set my color to be red, and I'm going to set my line weight. We'll set that. Line weight, there we are. I'm going to set that to 0.3. We'll go ahead and take a look at that. If my goal was to trim the arc based on this line, I would use the trim command as I always have. If I type in the command trim, the one place that this is different in 2021 is if I hit trim, it automatically tells me to select the object to trim. It's not asking me for a cutting edge. So if I go to select my arc, I get this. Okay? The reason for that is this was possible in 2021, but it wasn't the default. If I'm working on a smaller project that only has a handful of entities or not too much geometry to work with, basically if you don't give it a cutting edge in trim, everything is a cutting edge. That's great if I don't have a lot of geometry. If I do have a lot of geometry, by having it set that way, it's going to fan out and identify all of those things that could be potential trim or extending edges. And we don't necessarily, or we may not necessarily want that. So to restore that functionality, if I were to go into trim, there is an option as part of the command down here that I'm going to select for mode. And rather than the default being quick, I'm going to set that to standard. And then if we were to execute the trim command once again, it'll be as the default behavior was. I can select the object that I need and then remove the part that I'd like to get rid of without having to worry about risking performance, fanning out and finding all the entities, or worst case scenario, selecting or having to trim a bunch of things more so than what would be required normally. Okay, so with that, I'm running low on time. I'm going to hop back to my PowerPoint free zone here. So as a summary, we ran through a number of different things, talked about the layers, we talked about the command line, some things we could do with that. The log can be helpful. We also talked about locating things via locating ourselves in space using the geolocation, and then talked a little bit about trim. So with that, I'll open it up here at the end and ask Dana and Jeff, were we able to get to all the questions, or do we have a couple things we'll still need to take care of?
No, all the questions Jeff just answered. The one question there was.
Okay.
We should be good.
Fantastic. Sounds good. Just for folks that this may be the first visit with us, anybody that has registered or attended the session will receive a recording that they can view online and also download. If for some reason that IT has prevented you from accessing some of the streaming video, so you can take and review any of the information we've covered here at your leisure. And as always, if anything that we've covered, you have a question or like to get a little more information about that, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. So thank you for your time and attention. We appreciate you coming in, and look forward to having you visit with us again in the future. Have a great weekend. See ya.